Tak, autystyczny i autyzm, ADHD, osoby różne, zróżnicowane, neurotycznie. Muszę w ogóle mieć historię do telefonu. Nie powinny być trudne, takie proste, ale proste rzeczy najczęściej sprawiają na nich trudne. Ale wiesz, to dobrze się w ogóle gdzieś śpiewało tak dobrze się w domciu, no zamiast opuścić i wcześniej nie miałem tyle chęciu. Później rzucałem jeszcze perły moją gaslighting family. Gaslight family. Czekaj, no to muszę tak ustawić. Później to musi pójść dalej. Trzeba znotować myśli. Zaraz powiesz na Okarinie coś na resztę. Dramat, no. To co zrobiłem, to w ogóle było, już nie spalił. Jakbym się spalił, to nie pomniał. Spaliłem już paczki chyba. Faktycznie na kamerę to jest przychodni. How neurodivergent person can potentially be unlikable to a neurotypical person. And I guess every neurodivergent person will mask slightly differently, their coping strategies will be slightly differently.
No trudne eksperymenty wymagają poświęceń, akurat zazwyczaj widziałem się po poświęceniach jak coś nagrywam.
Interestingly responded to a Facebook comment just this morning on this. I did a video on this very topic a while back, and somebody commented on it. But you know, autistic people to autistic people is fine. You know, we don't have this problem. I was like, well, you know, a lot of people do say that. You know, how autistic people together are just fine with that. There's never a problem. And like I replied to them, ideally, yes. There is evidence to suggest, for example, that autistic people's communication styles do tend to synchronize quite nicely. So, yeah, there's fewer communication issues. However, first of all, like you said, we're all really different. And some people are just difficult. You can be autistic and still a bit of an arsehole, you know. That's perfectly plausible. But more interestingly, what you can find is that, especially with, you know, once you're in your 20s, 30s, 40s, because you're an autistic person that's lived in this world and had to mask for so long, that you end up kind of responding to other autistic people in a way that neurotypical people would. Because you've tried so hard to be neurotypical and to act neurotypically, that then if you meet somebody who doesn't bother to do that, or does act genuinely differently to you, you become just as freaked out by them as a neurotypical person. Because we're all human at the end of the day, and no humans seem to be able to deal with difference very well. We just struggle with it as a species. So actually, in reality, I think, it's a nice idea that all autistic people get on like a house on fire, but I think in practice, in reality, it's not necessarily given at all. You know, it's not guaranteed to always work. Because, yeah, I mean, just in conversation, for example, one way that autistic people learn to mask in the UK in communication is we learn to do that whole implicit communication thing. Because the UK is very heavily a low demand communicative culture, which means that we don't like to demand much of each other at all. You know, in the UK, our whole system of politeness is built around, if it's not too much bother, could you possibly do this? And, oh, if it's okay, might you be able to do this? No worries if you can't. You know, that whole thing is how we tend to communicate in this country. And that's very different to how an autistic person would naturally communicate, because we tend to be more straight, direct down the line. But as an autistic person who's naturally direct down the line, who's grown up in the UK all my life, I've become that very thing. I am now very, you know, no bothering not. I hint at things, I suggest things. I don't want to, but I do. And therefore, if I meet another autistic person, well, I'm basically acting typically. You see what I mean? So, in it'll take me a while to break that down and to get rid of that and to realise, oh, I can actually lose that and be more myself with this person. That can take ages, if it ever happens. And it can, really take time. So it's actually really complicated, I think. The damage that masking does to autistic people's psyche.
No, widzę, że autystycznie ludzie są postrzegani jako psychic, czyli tacy, co potrafią przejść niby w umysłach. A to nie o to chodzi. Żyliśmy w świecie, a być zmuszeni do tego, żeby zachować się inaczej niż
appears to be not masking at all or very much, because I've met some people that I suspect are autistic and they're not making fake smiles, they're not bothering with some stuff, and I sort of have a level of admiration, respect for them. Like, I'm putting in all this effort to try and pretend to be neurotypical to fit in, and it's exhausting, and they seem to have the confidence to not bother. Can that be a situation where there is like a level of admiration to a fellow autistic person, and it's almost like, teach me how to not be this exhausted all the time?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I can relate to that. I've met some autistic people who wear their autisticness, even more on their sleeve than I do. And yeah, they haven't gone down the path of people pleasing, let's say. But maybe I have as a trauma response. Ultimately, if we accept that all autistic people are basically traumatized by just being alive, which is...
Mówię o tym, że ludzie są straumatyzowani, czy tak są traktowani przez społeczeństwo, bo ich nie rozumie i sami się nie rozumieją, bo mają różnorodność. A właśnie zadowolenie ludzi. Się na tym skupiałem, później ciężko jest mi się wyrwać.
And that's not really the same as confidence, it's more just a kind of bullish, I'm not playing your playing games. I'm not doing this anymore. I'm just going to be, and that they're two very different paths. I very definitely went down the fawning path. Some people go down the fighting path. I'm going to be me no matter what. And yeah, I've got respect for that. I wish I could have done that. I don't think I have the strength of character to do that. I think if they do, then that's great. However, what I would say is that the story behind that honesty they might be showing could be very varied. There could be all kinds of things going on there. Traumatic experiences that go way beyond anything that we've experienced. Really deeply traumatizing events, perhaps, that we could only dream of, that we would not want to have experienced, could have led them to that place. Of being really just openly different. Or it could just be that, they've just decided at a young age, I'm not going to play that game. I'm just going to be me. And we are going to see more of that. I think that's worth saying. As neurodiversity becomes more and more mainstream and people talk about it more, and there is this increased push to just accept, hopefully, accept neurodivergent people for who they are, we are going to presumably begin to see gradually, a slow reduction in how much people are masking. Because presumably we won't need to as much, because society is slowly becoming more accepting of our differences. So I think we can expect over the next 10, 20 years to start to see young people in particular who just aren't masking like we do, who are far more open. And it's interesting, you think about how much that echoes other diversities, if you like, like a new generation coming along and just being open with it and being normal, and just, this is who I am, this is how I work. So similar to, like the LGBTQ experience, where 40, 50 years ago, people were still very much having to live on the down low, and keep it secret and all that kind of thing. And now, people who are in Generation Alpha, people who are just entering their teens now are living in a world where, well, hopefully it will continue where they can be open and they can just be themselves and there won't be any need to hide who you are. And I think the same thing's happening potentially with neurodiversity, but maybe a little bit behind the times. So yeah, we can maybe expect to see that.
Can there be a difference in insight in the mind of the autistic person? The autistic person who is heavily masking and is clearly putting on a character compared to an autistic person who is notice of the
Kurwa,
difference, doesn't seem to care. I had someone on the podcast who said an example where it could be, for example, a schizophrenic person on the back of a bus screaming out noises. You see that rarely. And they're doing that with confidence and they don't seem to care. They're certainly not hiding it because he said they have a lack of insight into the fact of just how different they are. Is it possible that some autistic people they don't have the insight to recognise that they are different, therefore they don't need to mask?
I think it's possible. Yeah, I think it's possible, certainly. I mean, it's different measures of lack of insight because often the differences that autistic people display will be very subtle. They won't be quite so obvious and grandiose as, a person sitting in the back of a bus and shouting. It will be, more small-scale things that, to be honest, you probably wouldn't even expect somebody to have much insight into because they're so tiny, these little differences. Like me scanning a room like this. It didn't occur to me that I was doing that for ages. It finally clicked one day, that's what I was doing. I guess I eventually had insight into it, but it took a while because it was so relatively small. So I think it's possible that you could have autistic people who are more openly autistic simply because they have no insight into what they're doing. But to be honest with you, my lived experience of talking and working and speaking with so many autistic people is that generally speaking, even those of us that are very open and very non-masking, half the problem is the amount of insight we do have into what's going on. Again, we can't necessarily put our fingers on it, but we know it's happening and it makes us miserable. So many autistic people I know are mortified the moment they realise that they are doing the equivalent of shouting at the back of the bus. When you say to them, can you just, turn your voice down a bit? Oh God, really, was I shouting? Oh God, I'm so sorry. That kind of thing. Or like a real sense of shame and embarrassment for doing something a little bit different, a bit quirky or weird or odd or whatever adjective you want to use to describe it. So I think, oftentimes we've got too much insight into it, but no real power to do anything about it. Because ultimately, how do you teach someone to do these things? They are, we were talking about it a little while ago. How on earth do you sit down and teach an autistic person the exact right length of time you're meant to laugh at something for?
A musisz nauczyć się tego nastawa, żebyś miała pewność czasu z pewnego żartu. Żeby to było wdrożone.
There seems to be a hard and fast rule of how long you're meant to laugh at a lame joke. At a poor quality joke. You're meant to laugh for 3 seconds. But we didn't get that memo. And I will probably laugh for too long, or not long enough. How on earth do you teach these myriad, tiny little subtle things to somebody? You can't.
You sort of observe, don't you? And then you try your best. Lots of trial and error.
Yeah, you need lots of trial and error.
Why did you not find that funny? You collaborate.
Yeah.
Or you eventually get there, but you never quite get there.
You never quite get there because it's too subjective. It's too vague. It's too ambiguous. It's impossible. The same reason why you can't get this test is the same reason you can't get 100% in an English test. It's too subjective. It's too open to interpretation. It's too varied in terms of who you're talking to. So autistic people who don't seem to get this automatically will always be at a disadvantage and struggling.
And when someone gets a diagnosis, at whatever stage of their life that happens, who do you think that helps the most? Do you think it helps the person who gets the diagnosis, or do you think it helps the people around them?
I think it helps the person themselves the most. It can help the people around them if they are willing to do the legwork of learning what it really means. If a non-autistic family member looks at that diagnosis and thinks to themselves, okay, well, that's great. Now that explains why Christmases are so tricky. I will be kinder to this person in future and I will be, less judgmental or whatever. Then sure, that's helped everybody. That's helped the family, it's helped the individual. We still fundamentally help the autistic person who's been diagnosed. But no, I think generally speaking that the beneficiary of it all is mostly the autistic person themselves, the neurodivergent person themselves, because they have that missing piece of the puzzle, to use imagery that isn't great, that might finally explain so much to them about themselves, which has been lacking, which I think is far more valuable to them than it is to others, because fundamentally the others can just ignore that if they wish. It won't mean as much to them, but to the individual who now knows this is why I do these things, this is why I do this is why I do that, this is why I struggle with this, or I'm weirdly good at that. It's a level of self-understanding and self-knowledge which is incredibly valuable. You know, I mean, it saved my life. I don't mind saying it really did save my life. You know, I mean, finding out what I found out about how my brain works, and I'm not alone in that by any stretch. You know, the number of people that sent to me, you know, just sent me messages saying, you know, I've read your book or books, and you know, now I've got a diagnosis. And, you know, it saved my life, and I never know how to respond to that because it feels too enormous. You know, it feels too big to respond to. It's so scary. That you know, so many people out there are struggling so much. So yeah, diagnosis I think is inherently most powerful for the individual. But to people around them who do a bit of work on it and use that new information themselves to do a bit of research, maybe they know a little bit more about ADHD, know a little bit more about autism. That's highly beneficial too. So yeah, I mean, you know, they do benefit a bit, but it benefits society. The more people there are that know about this stuff, the more people there are out there who, when they get that feeling of when they meet an autistic person, but who know what that means, who can then think, oh, I remember I did that course on autism, I read that book on autism, oh, that's probably what's going on here. Ah, okay, right, okay, well in that case, do you know, they can actually do something about it then. They can respond to their own prejudice, they can respond to their own judgment that they've done inadvertently, and try to not do that, you know, and try to accept and be like, okay, in that case then this person might just be autistic, in which case I'm going to try extra hard not to be, you know, unnerved by anything a bit different than they do.
It's really fascinating piece. I want to move on to my favourite part of the show, which is second ADHD item, absolute ADHD item.
Audience, absolutely, yeah. Big old slice of autism in this one, yeah.
It's really small.
It's really small.
It's been waiting us to do that club.
Yeah.
Just work it out. I'm going to reveal it now.
Yes, please do. Yay!
That is the Kurak of Sonic the Hedgehog.
There you go, Sonic the Hedgehog.
There you go, Sonic the Hedgehog. Why does underdog Sonic represent ADHD?
For me, it's the combination of the Lego and Sonic. It's the... For me, when I was a kid, growing up, video games were my Christmas fun. They were my safe house. They were where I would go to recover from a day at school, to recover from a difficult time. You know, childhood wasn't always easy. You know, we didn't have a huge amount of money when I was growing up. And, you know, it was tough. It was tough at times. So, you know, the ability to just go and turn on my Mega Drive and play it in Sonic, it rescued me a lot. And the thing that was so good about Sonic was that I look back now and I realise it really scratched the ADHD itch because it was so fast-paced. It was so easy to nip in and out of. You know, there were other games at the time where you had to really commit, you know, sit down, slog through this, you know, like Zelda and stuff. Quick barriers for those things. With Sonic, you just pick it up, you whack the cheat in, so you can play any level you liked, and you just do it. For 5 minutes, you just be zooming around, you know, dopamine everywhere as you're collecting all the little rings and bouncing off baddies and TV sets and things, and then you put it down when you got bored, which you invariably do. And for me, that was just, it was a wonderful place of security and sanctuary. And I still do it now. You know, I've got Sonic 1 and 2, the original Mega Drive, Genesis, whatever you want to call it, games, on my phone. I've got Sonic Mania on my PC. I've got it on my Switch. You know, there's Sonic everywhere. I've even got little pictures little screenshots of Sonic that I've turned into canvases on my stairs. So every time I go up to the attic, I pass these little images of little 2D Sonic in like various zones on the stairs, because it just reminds me of that sanctuary, that safe place that you represented. And of course, then when it came out in Lego form, that just sealed the deal, you know, because Lego is my other major childhood obsession and focus, you know, that's always brought me joy. And the Lego side is certainly far more autistic. You know, there's that whole thing of creativity, you know, nurturing and holding, and comparing and lining things up and setting things out and organising all my little bricks and stuff. But Sonic represents the ADHD. Sonic is himself almost certainly ADHD. You know, like when you think about the old comics and everything, the films even, he's got that streak of impulsive, you know, not really thinking too much about the outcome, very obviously fast. But also, it lines up that thing about ADHD where I think ADHD does come along with speed. Not necessarily physically, I mean, I can't run for anything, but speed of thought. You know, real processing speed. Which for me is what ADHD really is like a lot. You know, I've often said that for my, you know, my ADHD is not, I'm not hyperactive physically at all. I'm really, I mean, apart from, you know, the occasional restless leg and a bit of stimming, I'm hyperactive in my brain, you know, just, you know, it's like some of the hedgehogs just zipping around in my head.
A czapkę z klient też sobie zrobiłem, wyszedłem do sprawy w miarę. Tylko muszę, no to nie wygląda aż tak super dobrze. Tu mamy na większości 3 cm, troszkę się tak skaniane jeszcze sypienia tego, że ją zabijałem. Jeszcze muszę to szycie poćwiczyć. No już jest nieźle, co czapka to lepiej. Da się nałożyć, ale troszkę zacznę, muszę szyć na 63 po wodzie i jak jest taka dłuższa czapka, to powinien trochę wyżej dać tą warstwę, dziś jeszcze do centy, bez o 3 cm. Jak będzie na 5 cm, to wtedy można jeszcze sobie podwinąć, tak żeby nie było widać tej wyściółki środkowej z tkaniny, która chroni przed promieniowaniem RF. Dobrze bym pamiętał, żeby nagrać sobie może właśnie ten wkładam telefon gdzieś w lesie kiedyś. Bo tutaj to będzie zaburzone na pewno z każdej strony. Zbyt zaburzony pomiar. Jeśli łączę z Wi-Fi, no to bez sensu, powinien zablokować przekaz jak ten, nie? Też mi powinno pokazać, czy nie pokaże w telefonie, ten drugi błąd. No i to urwało połączenie, ale to nie tak dlatego, że urwało. Bo było w szapce chyba tylko dlatego, że ja się pocisnąłem. To trzeba nadal telefony sprawdzić, żeby się nie chce drugiego telefonu wyciągać. Z telewizją zakończyć 51 lepszy. Które zaczęły, bo nie mam siły. A jeszcze słucham o ADHD, gdy nie wiedział. I odpiśnie co ma. W trakcie diagnozy, dobra, ten jeszcze trzeba by... trzeba by podłubać, nie? Tam wyjście już jest zrobione. Miałem pośpiewać, to śpiewałem. Czytałem perły przez świnie. Co tam było? Biała Armia, 12 groszy. Coś mi stolica? Starać do moich sąsiadów. Mógł Polskę pośpiewać, wilki. Ocarina się grzała w ogóle. Straszne, nie nagrałem. To zawsze dobrze. Flow mode, o flow mode. Można wejść w widogę, nie lepiej wejść w flow state. Nie, flow state próbuję wybić cała rodzina. Jestem strasznie zmęczony, jak jestem zmęczony bardzo, to próbuję jakoś... Nie wiem, tam wykonywać rzeczy, które powinienem wykonywać, gdy wystąpiłem się normalnie. Ja się jeszcze daję sobie nacisnąć.
Which I've just kind of got into, and I will be in that state of total zen, focus, powering up my little critters. You know, I've got I've got an aptolin that I really want to evolve.
Spacjaliście, muszę
That's
po
going to
drodze
be my
sobie.
focus. And I'm going to be in this monotropic state of
Durny
joy,
jest
and
samo
calm, and
sabotażysta.
happiness doing
Jak pan najlepszy flot, tego nie nagram, ale nie mam
I'll be
kamery z
doing the
sobą.
same with Alien
To pewnie jest
Isolation.
samo sabotaż oparta na tym ODHD autyzmie. Zobaczymy.
very terrifying.
Będzie wyrok?
But yes, absolutely.
Bardzo możliwe,
It's
absolutnie. No ale jak słucham gościa tam, gości co
Audience question.
mają takie
The agony aunt,
schorzenia
which
na
is
to.
called the washing machine of woes, because my ADHD item is a
Przepraszam,
washing machine
ja
which
bym
helps me
słuchał
my clothes
sobie.
in the laundry.
As I did the other day, yeah, that's good.
Dobra, nie ma co rozczytować. On już kończy, a ciekawe, będzie babeczka jeszcze rozmawiać o...
This week, Pete,
Też puścimy, bo ja tego oglądam, pierdoły. Ale dobrze mówi, remote brain targeting, are we targeted? Funny, closing the gap.
Stalking is real.
Gang stalking is real, yes. Targeting individuals is real.
Mind control.
Agree, mind control
is real.
is real, yes, agree.
I had a nightmare and I couldn't sleep, so I decided to come on and make a video
Dobra,
and
babeczka pani.
kind of share from a book that I've been reading. And not only from the book that I've
Tak,
been
wiadomo, że
reading,
na polski jakby coś tam
but from what I'm seeing
wyglądał z
in my
Polski.
grandchildren.
Gdzie
And
to się nauczyła?
it's possibly unknowingly happening in myself, I'm not sure. But I know for a fact that I know my grandchildren and I know my babies, and their energy has shifted and the way they respond to certain
Gdzie to
things
się
has
działo?
shifted. Yeah?
Nie
Especially
wiem,
when I'm
komentarzy
speaking
to
on the topic of gang stalking in some way or attempting to create a video in some way and they are around me. I can sense that something is going on because of the way that they behave when I began to talk about this topic.
Tylko nie mam najgorsze, że nie mam podstawki na telefon, żadnej takiej dobrej. Wszystkie zepsuję, to też sam sabotuję.
Of time. Where I'm trying to communicate, it just kind of goes blank. Or there's been times that I make videos where all of a sudden I have everything laid out, I have all of my notes together, I know what I'm going to say, and all of a sudden I draw a blank. So I wanted to come on and share a bit of this book, just a couple of pages of the book that I've been reading, yes? So the book that I've been reading is called Remote Brain Targeting, where they use drones, satellites, BCI, use humans as lab rats, mind reading, nanotechnology, synthetic pathology, psyops, and microwaves. I wanted to start reading from a portion that's referred to as sound technology, or referred to as the S Squad. Silent, converted to voice FM. Silent hypnosis can be transmuted using a voice frequency modulator to generate the voice. It is a steady tone near the high end of hearing range, 15,000 hertz, plus the hypnotic voice varying from 30 to 4,000 hertz. These two signals are frequencies modulated. The output now appears as a steady tone, like tinnitus, but with hypnosis embedded. The FM voice controls the timing of the transmitter's pulse. Now, mind you, a lot of gang stalk or targeted individuals state that they hear tinnitus in their ears all the time. Each vertical line is one short pulse of microwave signal at the frequency to which the human brain is sensitive. Timing as each microwave pulse is controlled by each downslope crossing the voice wave. The brain converts the train of microwave pulses back to inaudible voices. There is no conscious defense possible against this form of hypnosis.
No ja już na ucho nakładam słuchawki sobie i słucham różnych źródeł informacji na raz i zamykam się w szopie.
This wave signal cannot normally penetrate the voltage across the nerve cells' walls. Radar signals consist of very short and very powerful pulses of sine waves type signals and can penetrate the steep voltage across the nerve wall cells. Differences in osmosis and ions. Dissolved salt components cause a small voltage across the cell walls. When a small voltage appears across a very tiny distance, the change in voltage is called very steep. It is this steep voltage that keeps normal radio signals from throwing us into convulsions. The mind-altering mechanism is based on the subliminal carrier technology, the silent squad spread spectrum, which is also known as SSSS. Sometimes called the S-Squad, or just simply Squad. It was developed by Dr. Oliver Lowry. Okay. A silent communication system in which non-aerial carriers in the very low and very high audio frequency range or in the adjacent ultrasound frequency spectrum are amplified and the frequency modulated with the desired intelligence and propagated acoustically or vibrationally for inducement into the brain, typically through the use of a loudspeaker, earphones, or piezoelectric transducers. The modulated carrier may be transmitted directly in real time or may be conveniently recorded and stored on mechanical, magnetic, or optical media for delayed or repeated transmission to the listener. According to Lieutenant S. And according to literature by Silent Sound Incorporated, it is now possible using supercomputers to analyze human emotional EEG patterns and replicate them, and then store these emotional signature clusters on another computer and at will silently induce and change the emotional state of the human being. All schematics, however, have been classified by the U.S. government and are allowed to reveal the exact details, are not allowed to reveal the exact details. We make tapes and CDs from the German government, even the former Soviet Union countries, all with the permission of the U.S. State Department, of course. The system was used throughout Operation Desert Storm, Iraq, quite successfully. Induced alpha and theta biofeedback cluster movements is an output from the world's most versatile and most sensitive EEG machines. This device has a grain capacity of 200,000 as compared to most other EE machines, which have the grain capacity of 50,000. Now, mind you, I don't know what year this book was written in, so you can imagine what it is now in 2025, yeah? It is software driven by computers, a noise level similar to submarines for detecting small objects underwater at extreme range. The purpose of all this high technology is to plot and display
Kawałek psalmu, który miałem napisać, zacząłem 6 minuty nawet. Mam
The
cały tekst.
illustration shows an
Już nie wiem, co
EEG
chciałem
display
zrobić.
from a single individual, taken of the left and right hemisphere simultaneously. The speaking of the left and right hemispheres of the brain. This technology is very similar to that used to generate P300 waves.
Psalm
Now, I'm not
17,
sure what
błaganie o wyzwolenie z
P300
wrogów.
waves
Widać
are.
Sunsecia, Live
So they
Reading
have the
Bible,
capacity
First
to
Century,
clone
King James
emotions.
Version, Update Gdański Biblia, może ten, to jest King James.
And so what will happen is
Hear the right,
they will
Lord, attend unto my cry,
figure out what
give ear
triggers you.
unto my prayer,
Yeah? In
which
cloning
goeth
your
not
emotions, why
out
would they
of
want to do that?
faint lips.
They want to clone
Let
your
my
emotions so that
sentence come
they
from
know what frequency
forth
to
from
send
thy
towards
presence.
your direction.
Let
They
thine
want you to
eyes
feel that
behold
emotion, whether
things
that
with
be anger, whether that
equity.
be sadness, whether that be
Thou hast
anxiety or fear.
tested mine heart,
I
thou
believe
hast
that that's what
visited
these
me
towers
in
are,
the night.
excuse me,
Thou hast tried
are designed to
me
do.
and shalt find
These
nothing.
towers
I
clone
am
the frequency of
purpose that
different emotions.
my mouth shall not
Okay,
transgress.
so
concerning the works of man by the word of thy lips.
They can basically
I have been kept from
control
the path
emotions
of the destroyer.
population,
Uphold my
the
goings
masses.
in thy
Like I
paths,
spoke about
that
in
my
the short, when
footsteps
everybody
slip
ran out
not.
and
I have
they
called
were
upon
afraid
thee,
that we were
for
going to all
thou
run out
wilt
of tissue
hear me.
paper, and everybody
O
ran out and bought
that,
that
incline
during
thine ear unto me and
the pandemic.
hear my speaking.
Instead of being afraid that they
zmęczony
weren't
sobą
going to, that they were going to be unalive,
Show thy
instead
marvelous
went
of
out
kindness,
and
O
went
thou
shopping
that
for toilet paper.
savest
And
by
so
the right
they
hand
have the capacity
them
to
that
control
put
the
their trust
masses
in thee
with a
from
certain
those
emotion.
that rise up
And they
against
also
them.
have the capacity to
Show thy
zoom
marvelous
in
kindness,
on a crowd
O
of people
O
and
thou that
control the emotions
save
of one
by
single individual. Yeah?
show thy
So
marvelous
this
of
next
kindness, O
paragraph
thou
is
that
on cloning the
savest
emotions.
by thy right hand them that put their trust in thee from those that rise up against them.
EEGs,
Keep me as
scientists
the
can
apple of
identify
the
and
eye,
isolate the
hide me under the
brain's
shadow of thy wings, from the
low-end
wicked that
emotional
oppress
signature
me,
clusters.
from my the enemies who compass me about.
Synthesize
They are
them
enclosed
and store
in their
them on
own
another
thought.
computer.
With
In
their
other
mouth
words,
they
by
speak
studying
proudly.
the subtle characteristic
They have now
brainwave patterns
encompassed
that
us
occur
in our
when a
steps.
subject
They have
experiences
set
a
their
particular
eyes
emotion,
bowing down to the
scientists
earth,
have been able to
like a lion that is
identify
greedy for
and
his prey, even as a young lion lurking
duplicate
in the secret
brainwave
place.
patterns and can now amplify that duplication.
Arise, O Lord,
These
disappoint
clusters
them,
are then
cast them
placed
down,
on the silent
deliver
sound
my
carrier
soul from the wicked
frequency and will
by
silently
thy
trigger
sword.
the occurrence of the same
From
basic
men
emotion in
which
another
are
human
thy
being.
hand, O Lord, from men
Regarding
of the
system
world that
delivery and
have
applications,
their
there is a lot
portion
more
in
involved here
this life,
than
and
a simple
his belly,
subliminal sound
thou
system.
fillest with
There
thy
are numerous
hid treasure.
patent technologies
They are
that
full
can
of
be
children and
piggybacked
leave the rest of their
individually or
substance to their
collectively
babies.
into a carrier
As for me,
frequency
I will
to emit
behold thy
to emit
face
all
in righteousness.
kinds of
I shall be
effects.
satisfied when I awake
Let me say that again.
with
There
thy
can be
likeness.
numerous patent technologies that can be piggybacked individually or collectively into a carrier frequency to emit all kinds of effects.
Mówię o
There
rzeczach
appears to be two
takich.
methods of delivery with the system. One is the microwave introduced into the brain of the subject, limited to short-wave operations. So this is something they might use if they're like the neighbor and they're posted up in the neighbor's house or in the vacant house next door or the Airbnb next door. Then they can use this direct microwave induction into the brain of the subject, limited to short-range operations. The other, as described above, utilizes ordinary radio and television carrier frequencies. And today, of course, that would be computers and cell phones. Far from necessarily being used as a weapon against the person, the system does have limitless positive applications. However, the fact that the sounds are subliminal makes them virtually undetectable and possibly dangerous to the general
No,
public.
jak mieście otoczęcie, to jest ciężko, tak? Wszyscy
In
powiązani
more
do
conventional
miejscu
use,
się
the
pozbierają,
silent sound subliminal
przyjeżdżają.
system might utilize voice
Mówią lekarza,
commands,
wstępnie
such
ciężko pochodzić,
as
że to się nie dało być przedstawione
as an
wszędzie.
adjacent
Muszę, im więcej randomowo, tym lepiej.
as an adjacent to security systems. Beneath the musical broadcast that you hear in stores, okay, as an adjacent to security systems. So for an example of that is, beneath the musical broadcast that you hear in stores and shopping malls may be a hidden message that extorts, basically deters against shoplifting. And while voice commands alone are powerful, when the subliminal presentation system carries cloned emotional signatures, the result is overwhelming. So just like right now during the holidays, they start like in October playing Christmas music. Well, behind that Christmas music is also subliminal messages that are saying that are deterring shoplifting, but are also encouraging one to go in debt to buy these Christmas gifts and stuff. And so wherever you go, there usually subliminal messages to make you spend your money and to prevent them from losing their money. Which would explain why people can be in debt over their head and then they go out and run up their credit credit card, and now their debt has doubled. And so they're paying for Christmas. They go shopping in December, and they're paying for Christmas. December, January, February, March, April, May. They're still paying for Christmas presents, and so it just doesn't make sense. Free markets use this for this technology are the common self-help tapes, positive affirmations, relaxation, and meditation tapes, as well as methods to increase learning capabilities. But there is a strong evidence that this technology is being developed towards global mind control. The secrecy involved in the development of the electromagnetic mind-altering technology reflects the tremendous power that is inherent in it. To put it bluntly, whoever controls this technology can control the minds of all men. There is evidence that the U.S. government has plans to extend the range of this technology to involve all people, all countries. This can be accomplished and is being accomplished by utilizing the newly completed HAARP, which is HAARP, projects overseas areas, and the GWEN, which is GWEN network, now is placed in the U.S., and the U.S. government denies all of this. Well, the HAARP machines are, for those of you who don't know, I'm not trying to insult your intelligence at all, but the HAARP machine controls the weather. And if you can control the weather, you can control an entire country with the weather, right? Or an entire state for sure. Dr. Michael Pressinger is a professor of psychology at neuroscience at Loreton University, in Ontario, Canada. His work and findings indicate that strong electromagnetic fields can and will affect a person's brain. Temporal lobe stimulation can invoke the feeling of the presence of disorientation and perceptual irregularities. It can activate images stored in the subject's memory, including nightmares and monsters that are normally suppressed. Well, an example of that is yesterday I was listening to someone who had said that the gang stalkers had cut had cut her brake lines on her vehicle. And of course that caused concern for me because I'm frequently riding around with my grandchildren in my vehicle. And so it was on my mind. And when I went to sleep last night, I had a horrible nightmare about my brake lines being cut. And so when they say that temporal lobe stimulation can invoke a feeling of a present disorientation or perceptual irregularities, it can activate images stored in the subject's memory, including nightmares and monsters that are normally suppressed. The Department of Defense says that the United States has not only developed an operational mind control machine, but has also distributed models for use by allied countries. U states that such machines pose a great threat to human rights and the American way of life. The American illusion. He calls the device mind-reading machine. U writes that there are two sources of information detailing the existence of the mind-reading machine. The first evidence in the 1970s, the South China Morning Post reported that the University of Maryland had invented a thought-reading machine. The original purpose of this invention was to help authorities investigate severe car accidents. It was to be used on people who were severely injured to get their accounts of how the accidents occurred. Yeah, right. In the spring of 1984, Yu was a lieutenant colonel serving in the National Defense Department of Taiwan. At that time, Yu read the classified document from the department that he serviced under. The document said the Military Police Department of Taiwan had purchased several of the mind-reading machines from the United States. In Taiwan, it was called the Psychological Language Machine. This document was a request to the United States for parts and repairs for several malfunctioning machines. The machines allegedly used microwaves to deliver spoken messages directly to the human brain, as well as using radio waves to hypnotize people or change their thoughts. Yu reports that before he left, this machine had become one of the most effective weapons for the Secretary Department of Taiwan. In 1993, Defense News announced that the Russian government was discussing with American counterparts the transfer of technological information and equipment known as acoustic cycle correction. The Russians claimed that this device involved the transmission of specific commands via static or white noise bands into the human subconscious without upsetting their intellectual functions. Demonstrations of this equipment have shown encouraging results after exposure of less than 1 minute and have produced the ability to alter behavior on unwilling subjects. The U.S. Department of Defense medical engineer claimed in 1989 that the U.S. and Israel had regularly used microwaves to condition and control the minds of the Palestinians. So this book that I'm reading, Remote Brain Targeting, is basically confirming. It's a book of historical, it's a compilation of historical documents revealing the role of various agencies, including Scientology, gleaned from unclassified documents. And it's the Freedom of Information Act. So all this stuff in this book is like just historical documentations of how the United States and other countries have used electromagnetic and microwave warfare against the people to control their thoughts, implement thoughts. They can duplicate your emotions and then implement those emotions out across the population, and other people can feel those emotions because what they do is they capture the frequency of the emotion, and then they can put those frequencies within these towers. They can emit it through computers, through cell phones, or just through a vibrational frequency, a hertz. Yeah. So, for example, a natural level of hertz is 432, which is the frequency of nature. You know, that's why it's so important that we get as close to nature as we possibly can. Yeah. But they can control the entire population's energy. They can, through the frequencies that they emit. I often go back to when the virus first hit, and everyone was afraid. There was all types of information coming from all different directions when it came to the virus. It was all types of information coming from different directions when it came to the vaccine, and then we had to stay 6 feet apart, and everybody was isolating in their homes, and if you did come out of your homes, you had to wear a mask. It was complete and total control over the entire world. And over the entire world, while all of this was occurring, towers were being put up. I was in the jungles of Peru during a period of this, and they were putting up those towers in Peru. Yeah? These towers were in the most rural towns. They're putting up these towers. So these towers are everywhere. Like, none of us can get away from these towers. And they were doing all of this during the time that everyone was in chaos with, you know, anytime you fear that you're going to lose, you're going to be unalived, that's all you can think about. And so while everybody was thinking about that, everybody was in fear, everyone was afraid of one another, we were all staying 6 feet apart from one another, nobody wanted to be around anybody. We couldn't go visit our grandmothers, we couldn't go visit our grandbabies, we couldn't go visit our parents, because if they were elderly or if they were too young, then they were at the highest risk. It was complete and total control over every breathing human being. While we were going through that, they were busy putting up these towers. These towers carry a frequency that can be emitted control your mood. It can control how you feel. It can control your mind. And they are implementing this warfare on their own people across the world, not just here in the U.S. Now, I just did a live with Brother Kwame Sunhorse, and he was saying that we have to tap into our spirituality. So whatever that is, you know, you need to tap into that and tap into it on a strong level. Connect to the source that you believe created you. Because with the age of Aquarius, they are literally trying to take that away from you. Trying to take away your right to control you. And now they are implementing this warfare that is normally used on the enemy. Now they're implementing it on everyday people. And no one is exempt. The elderly is not exempt. Children aren't exempt. No one's exempt from this. I've actually witnessed it in my own grandchildren. Which leads me to believe that this whole gang stalking thing, it's almost like it's like a video game for them. They can just mind control everyone, you know, to include the gang stalkers. Now, I'm not giving the gang stalkers any credit. Like, I do not like those people. I do not like them at all. But there is a slight chance that they are being mind controlled as well. This is an experiment on the American people as a whole. Yeah. And I don't know that there's much that we can do about it. But I'm trying to do my part by making people aware. Yeah. And that's all I have right now. But thank you for tuning into my channel, Closing the Gap, where we make a conscious effort to meet you where you're at on your healing and your spiritual journey. If you like my energy, please don't forget to like and subscribe. Maybe leave a comment. If you're really feeling my vibe, don't forget to hit that bell notification so that you know the next time that I upload. Don't worry too much, self-healers. We got this. We're going to overcome. This isn't the first time that they've used these tactics on the American people or people of other countries. And we'll get through this somehow. Yeah? They can't unalive us all, because without us, what do they have to control? Well, that's all I have for you. You guys have a good day. We'll chat later.
Jak się skończyła? Mam takie coś. A zakując kamerkę, super. Nie wiem, z kompa w końcu spalić któregoś. Ten live coś tak zbieram. Dobra, ostatni taki filmik może się w końcu zbiorę. Tylko tam muszę z tej strony jeszcze parę rzeczy ogarnąć i może ich chwyci wena jeszcze. Około 4 na coś. Na jakieś pośpiewanko albo coś, ja pogranko. God say it doesn't matter. No oglądam taką pamięć proroka albo modlitwy. This new week shall be prosperous. Command liberty, mind control. This Spanish. Też może być ciekawe, od 1,5 godziny. Przepraszam. Sorry, mi scusi. A to jest śmiechowy. Magnus Carlsen, Overpowers Richard Rapport. Oni dobrze są, grałem raport, teraz się spóźnił, go rozwalił. Dobry, jest chyba 15, jest ten raport gdzieś. Węgier. Ale tam lecą, kurde. 10 minut, a może to zobaczymy szybko szachy. Ja w międzyczasie poczyszczę i jeszcze coś ciekawego tam zdrowia. O. Fail, learn, rise, repeat. Don't fear failure. Fear not trying. Shipa wa saikau no moto. O to można posłuchać następnie, patrz. Jakaś japońska pewnie technika filozofii życia, która pomoże pozbyć się niepotrzebnych uprzedzeń. How you lose your inner sense of right and wrong. A to Book of Wisdom, on jest też dobra. Dobra, zobaczymy, czekaj. Czekaj, zobaczymy, to się zrobiła kolejność odwrotna chyba. Tego chciałem, to było. To jest ciekawe i tu zawinimy.
So the elites have made people Satanists
Book of Wisdom,
without even knowing.
dobrego się robi.
This is how crazy the world
Nie
has
się
gone.
ze wszystkim zgadzam, ale
And this is why we need to understand symbolism, because most people are walking
to się
around
zgadza.
and they are in fact satanic without even realizing. They make you believe that Satanism is a religion when it's not. It's not the worship of Satan. Satanism is a state of consciousness, which is exactly what the skull and bones means. If we look at the skull and bones, we have a skull, which encloses the brain's intelligence, the mind, thinking, thought. Then we have bones, which are the limbs for the arms and legs, which take action. So this is a symbol of thinking and acting, the mind and the body. Thought and action. But notice it's grey. Grey has no emotion. There is no emotional symbolism here. We are mental, physical, and emotional. But there is no emotion. Why? Because emotion is empathy, love, care. Emotion tells you what is right and wrong at all times. So a Satanist is someone who thinks and acts without connection to the feminine forces of consciousness, such as emotion. We're meant to think, feel, and then act. If we think of stealing an old lady's purse and we feel in our heart that it's wrong, then we should not take the action. But a Satanist is a person who goes against the love of the heart. That is a Satanist, and most people are Satanists without even realizing. It's all an illusion. Heaven and hell are not places, they are mind states. Your head is heaven and your heel is hell. And the bottom of the foot is called the soul. Your soul is suffering in hell if your mind is negative, filled with chaos.
żeby tylko oglądał, to żeby miał. Bo ja nie nadążę tłumaczyć 30 deski na pewno. O! Czekaj, to od początku, żeby to ciekawe jest.
Satanism is a state of consciousness. Exactly what the skull and bones means. If we look at the skull and bones, we have a skull, which encloses the brain's intelligence, the mind, thinking, thought. Then we have bones, which are the limbs for the arms and legs, which take action. So this is a symbol of thinking and acting, the mind and the body. Thought and action, but notice it's grey. Grey has no emotion. There is no emotional symbolism here. We are mental, physical, and emotional, but there is no emotion. Why? Because emotion is empathy, love, care. The emotion tells you what is right and wrong at all times. So a Satanist is someone who thinks and acts without connection to the feminine forces of consciousness, such as emotion. We're meant to think, feel, and then act. If we think of stealing an old lady's purse and we feel in our heart that it's wrong, then we should not take the action. But a Satanist is a person who goes against the love of the heart. That is a Satanist, and most people are Satanists without even realizing. It's all an illusion. Heaven and hell are not places, they are mind states. Your head is heaven and your heel is hell. And the bottom of the foot is called the soul. Your soul is suffering in hell if your mind is negative, filled with chaos, seeking validation from the external world. You are not your mind. You are the soul, the one who observes nature of the mind. Life is all a mental game. And if your mind is in chaos and negativity, your soul, will suffer from the mind. Heaven and hell are just symbolic places, symbolic of the state of your mind. Life is an experience. Lines control your mind, control your reality. Circles are feminine, lines are masculine. This is present in the human body. Undeniable proof that everything is an intelligent design. The Egyptians knew this. The rod with a curve represents feminine. The rod with a line represents masculine. Crossing the masculine and feminine rods together represents unity of masculine and feminine energies of consciousness. The Freemasons show you the same thing. Compass creates circles. Feminine. Square creates lines. Masculine. Unity of masculine and feminine energies of consciousness. Aligning the left and right brain. Aligning actions with intuition. Mastery over spirit and matter. It's all the same symbolism, merging the masculine and feminine energies of consciousness. And this is what allows you to reach a higher consciousness, a higher understanding of yourself. Masturbation is a sin. A sin is not an action against God. The word sin means god of the moon. In Mesopotamian, the moon is feminine. The feminine aspect of consciousness is intuition and emotion. She tells you what is right and wrong at all times. An action taken against what you know is right is a sin against your intuition, which leads you down an egoic path of destruction. All actions come from emotions that you felt. A sin is a negative emotion that pulls you down and lowers your consciousness, and it's an action that goes against your intuition. Religion is fear-based control. They want you to fear that you go to hell. To control your physical actions, you feel God's law every single day. You know what is right at all times. Lust is an illusion. This is what Lucifer is. This is the sigil of Lucifer. This is your brain's visual field. Lucy means light. Fer means bring. Your eyes are the light bringer that allows you to see physical reality. You are a soul in a physical body. The physical world is a simulation produced by your nervous system. Lucifer represents the beauty of the world. Something that looks beautiful and appears to be good. It pulls you in, but leads you to something evil and dark. Lucifer is something that seduces you, appears to be good, but slowly corrupts you into darkness. It looks like the light, but it takes you into darkness. The Holy Grail is the neck and the head. The ancients traveled across the world to find the Holy Grail. This journey to find the Holy Grail is symbolic of going within the self. They did not travel across lands to find the Holy Grail. Holy Grail is an inward journey of gaining the sacred knowledge of what you truly are. The cup is filled with light. Light is symbolic of knowledge. When someone's very smart, you call them bright. Illuminati is illumination of the mind. It's information of the self. Quest to find the Holy Grail is about finding the light within, gaining information about the self. Ancient knowledge is hidden behind allegories and stories. The Vatican is a snake. The snake represents Satan. Snakes are stuck to the ground. The ground symbolizes the physical world. The ground represents low consciousness, identifying with the ego. But snakes can shed their skin.